Hi, welcome back. It's John Macdonald here, ProScot's director again. You've hopefully just watched element A there just now. We're now moving on to element B. So let's have a look at what's in element B then. So first thing is, we're going to take you outside. We're going to go outside just now, and we're going to look at the location and the function of all the controls on the motorcycle and explain how they work. Now remember that if you've ridden motorcycles before, then we're obviously going to be able to get through this very quickly with just a quick Q&A session. Again, we're going to be making sure that you can carry out the basic machine checks, roadworthiness checks, make sure that you know if your bike's safe to be on the road. For example, does it need adjusted, does it need lubricated, or would that part need replaced? So we're not trying to turn you into mechanics here, but we do need to make sure that you know if your bike's legal and roadworthy. And if you are not comfortable carrying out any adjustments or maintenance that's required, at least someone that is for you. We're also going to make sure that you know how to take the bike on and off the stand as well. And there's different stands, side stand, centre stand, we'll show you them in a moment. And be able to wheel the bike round, which basically means walking with the motorcycle. Bike Paints that used to sponsor me back up in my bike racing up in Coopermuir, who did great paint jobs for me. They used to tell me that about 50% of their work used to come from people taking bikes on and off stands and just wheeling them around, walking them around. It wasn't people crashing motorcycles, it was just basically manual handling. So we'll show you the correct way to manual handle your motorcycle. And we're going to do that with proper balance. And we're also going to show you how to bring the bike to controlled stop just by walking with it, using the brakes as well. And I think that's pretty much covers that, apart from, yeah, showing you how to start and stop the engine. So this is us now doing element B, introducing you to the motorcycle. So without further ado, remember what we said though, this is more a presentation here, so I am sort of doing a very traditional telltale style here. Our style now, very much with the new standards check, would be very much coaching you. This is why I'm hoping that you're watching these videos, so when you do come in, we can get away with asking you, coaching you, and drawing your knowledge, your experience, getting you to reflect on what you do know. And as long as we say that knowledge and understands there, we can move the session along so much quicker. So please invest in the time watching these elements. It's going to help you enormously when you do come in, and then we can get more time spent on the bikes. Okay, so Lewis, follow me, let's head outside. Here we come. So here we have a motorcycle out here, and what I'm going to do now is just go through all the hand controls. Now, bearing in mind I've got to pitch this at a level that doesn't matter if it's someone that's experienced watching this video or if it's someone that's a novice. I've got to always pitch this now as a presentation at the person with what is potentially the least amount of experience. So let's start off with the hand controls first of all. I've got my wee notes over there just to make sure, and my clock to make sure I don't talk too long. I'm at 3 minutes already, gosh, time flies. First thing is, let's talk about the hand controls. This here is the throttle on the motorcycle, operated by the right hand, and doing this increases the flow of fuel and air into the engine, makes the engine work harder. So in the correct gear, that's going to give us acceleration. When we roll the throttle back like this, we're going to get deceleration. That's how we control the speed, the same way as you would do on a car with the accelerator. Like all controls, the same as on a car, it should be used smoothly and progressively. Never take your hand off and let it snap back like this. Always smooth on, smooth off. Alright, and very slow movements that you're using. Imagine your controls are made of plastic. Don't go snatching them, grabbing them. Just try and be smooth and gentle with the controls. That's going to reflect in smooth bike control as well. So that's your accelerator, or your throttle as we call it. All right, twisting towards it to go faster, rolling it back to go slower. All right, and in the gear it'll give acceleration, deceleration, what we call acceleration sense. Sticking on this side, if you link it back to your push bike, this here is your front brake, your most powerful brake on a motorcycle. Not only does that slow the motorcycle down, it also brings at the back of the bike lights on at the back, which lets us know that we're slowing down. The greater the pressure, the more braking effort that you're going to get. Now, we should use all 4 fingers, but as you can see here, I had an accident and I've lost the tip of my finger, so it's kind of hard for me to get all 4 on, but we'd usually recommend all 4 fingers on the brake. So that's your front brake. You hear the wee click, that little click is a micro switch operating to bring the brake light on in the back. Alright, so that's the front brake, the most powerful brake in a motorcycle. Jump over to this side, Lewis, with the hand controls. We've got the clutch on this side. Now, just to explain the basics of the clutch here, when the clutch is out, that's what we call a fully engaged position, or the drive position. When we've got the clutch pulled in, that's a fully disengaged position. Alright, now for the car drivers, that's equivalent to the clutch being down to the floor, pushed down to the floor. That's equivalent to the clutch coming up. Now when we do let a clutch out slowly, we get to a point called the biting point, which I'll explain in a moment for our novices, the same as the car. And at that point there, all hell's about to break loose depending on what you do next. This is why you need to release it about the thickness of a £1 coin, push the plates together, clutch plates together, the bike will start to move, and as it starts to move, then gently release. A lot of people teach biting point and gently release. No, almost guaranteed to stall every time. Biting point, release at a fixed amount just to create drive and momentum. If you let out enough, you'll get enough momentum to get your balance and get your foot up. If you don't let out enough initially, the bike will move very slowly and you'll be skipping your feet. So it's a bit of practice, this one, just learning how much to ease the clutch out from the biting point to get sufficient drive to move the bike off. Once you then begin to move that bike a bit further, you'll find then that the bike will then move off smoothly. Alright? So the clutch is used for moving off smoothly, it's used for slow speed control, it's also used for changing gear, and when you come to rest, pulling in the clutch so that you don't stall. Sticking up here, Lewis, we've got the instrument panel up here on this bike showing the revs here. There's a digital speedo as well. You get digital speedo here if I turn this on here as well. Neutral light. If I had the bike started just now, you'd also get a blue light for the high and the low beam, and also the indicators. If we put them on, you'll see the indicators as well in it. So that's, and there's a fuel gauge and a trip meter as well. Alright, so that's what we call the instrument cluster. We've got the key here, turning it on, and then it would be pushing, as we'll jump over here, Lewis, the start button to be able to start the motorcycle, the start button. That's off. A lot of people, car drivers especially, want to keep turning the key here to try and start the motorcycle. It doesn't work like that. It's key on, make sure it's in neutral, and then hit the start button. Yeah, so that's the main hand controls at the front here. So we'll jump over to this side now, Lewis. We mentioned indicators. You push them right to go right, left to go left, push in to cancel. That's high beam, that's low beam. Used to be in the good old days that you had to put your lights from off to parking lights to on and then high and low beam. They're now on all the time. Either you've got a choice of low beam or high beam. This is also the flash at the back here, so you can flash the high beam on by pushing that. That flashes the high beam on over there. We've already mentioned around this side the push button to start. Some bikes have got additional features like a red button up here. That's what's called a kill switch, used in an emergency to cut all electrical power to the motorcycle. And that's really the main controls up the top here that we've got up the top. Jumping down to this side, we've got another brake now. This is the rear brake used by the ball of the foot. A lot of people put the foot off to the side like this. Once you've used it, better to put your foot back, the ball of the foot back on the peg and then over it. Don't leave your foot hanging over it. You'll end up with a sore foot, you'll end up with a bit of cramp, and you rest it on it and you end up wearing the brake out and also putting the back brake light on as well accidentally. Now your rear brake, as you can see here, is a mechanical device on this particular bike. This one's got a disc brake on the front, which is a more powerful brake. On the back here we've got what we call a hub brake. It's not quite as powerful, the hub brake on the back, but still effective enough for a little bike like this, a little 125. So that's your front brake, your rear brake. There's actually 3 brakes on a motorcycle. When you close the throttle, you've got the first brake, which is your engine brake, engine braking or acceleration sense. And if you're at the lower the gear you're in, the more engine braking you're going to get. Your next most effective brake is the rear brake. We tend to use rear brake only when we're doing speeds typically below sort of jogging pace, which is kind of 7-8 mile an hour speeds. Below that, we're using rear brake only because it affords a better level of control, and also it's powerful enough for slow speed. As the speeds increase though, we're going to be using a combination of front and rear brake, and how we use those pressures will depend what we're doing. Normal control braking, typically more front than rear is what it says in the manual, but to give you an idea what I mean by more front than rear, if I imagine my 4 fingers here, typically about 75% braking effort at the front to 25% at the rear on a dry surface for normal control braking, and that's braking effort incidentally, that's not lever movement. So about 75% of the braking effort with the front wheel, about 25% on the rear. These are just rough estimates. If it's wet though, it's more evenly distributed front and rear, more what we call 50-50. So brake wheel, both wheels braking about the same. When we come to things like emergency stops, pressure distribution is not that much different. That's not what, at least that's what we teach. It's not really that much difference in terms of the percentage distribution, but the percentages, the actual pressures obviously would be greater, especially if it's on a dry surface. Alright, so there's a little bit of idea about the brakes then. When you're using one brake on its own, the rear brake for slow speed control work, and both brakes together, and how those percentages are distributed. As the speeds increase, your front brake becomes more important, and the rear brake, like the front one, also brings on the brake light at the back. Round this side then, Lewis, we've got our gear lever down here. That's if it's a manual motorcycle. If it's a clutch gear bike, of course, we don't have that. We just have a twist and go. Now the way this works, Lewis, if you look up here, I'll put my foot underneath, and my toe goes underneath like this to lift up, to lift the lever up, and it lifts up and it pings back again. Goes down and it pings back again. Now let's explain what's happening there when I do that. Now my foot goes on the top like this when I'm down shifting, and it goes underneath when I'm lifting up. Now let's just show my fingers here, Lewis. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Imagine a 5-speed gearbox. I want you to imagine at the moment it's between 1 and 2. It's what we call in neutral. If I push that down, it's going to click it into first gear. I put my toe underneath and lift it up. If I don't lift it fully, it'll go back into neutral. So I've got to lift it up far enough that it goes into second. That's it now in second gear. I let it go, it springs back, but it's still in second gear. Now I've got the option now. It's like a toggle switch here. If I push it down again fully, through neutral, it'll go back into first. If I lifted it up though, it would go to 3. So I've got that option then. Simple way to remember is this: if you lift it up higher, you go higher gears, bigger numbers, higher speeds, and lower gears is lower speeds. So basically the gearbox in a motorcycle can be thought of like the gearbox on your push bike, for example, for those that are novice riders, in the sense that you're trying to take your energy, your efficiency, and use that efficiently when you're cycling a bike. So you don't cycle up a steep hill in top gear on your bike. You used the low gear, didn't you? Same on the bike, low gear, first gear for moving off. And as the speeds increase, the gears increase till you get up towards the cruising gears, the same as it is on a car. So that's the gearbox, an efficient means. Now remember, when you're going between first and second, full movements are required. It's very easy to get back into neutral. Now if I put the light on here, Lewis, I'll show here that if it's in neutral at the moment, I push my indicators off. Now if I push it down, you'll see the neutral light went out and it went into 1. If I put my foot underneath and I lift it up slightly, it goes to neutral. But if I lift it up fully, oops, it's because my bike's not moving this, so I'm going to have to rock it a little bit, move the bike a little bit. Oh, there we go, we're into second now. So you see now it went into second gear, so I just had to rock the bike a little bit to get into second. Now at that point there, I'll put it back into neutral. If I push it down slightly, you'll see it goes back into neutral. So that's how your gear lever works on a motorbike. Unlike a car where you could block change and miss gears out and go from 4 to 2 or 2 to 4, you can't do that on a motorbike. You've got to go sequentially, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, if it's a 6-speed box, all the way up to 6, and then all the way back down again. You hear people using terms like 1 down, 5 up, that means it's a 6-speed box. 1 down, 4 up just means it's a 5-speed box. Okay, now we've kind of covered those main foot controls. Let's talk about some other controls that we got in a motorbike. This one doesn't have a fuel tap on it because it's what we call a gravity fed system. It goes from the petrol tank right down into, not a carburetor, this one's got fuel injection system. But the good old days, they had taps, fuel taps on them, and you had fuel on, fuel off, and typically reserve, and sometimes even prime. And the idea here was it was actually a tap that switched the fuel off to stop the fuel from maybe flooding through the night through your carburetor and coming out in the morning and finding petrol all over your garage. Nowadays it's what we call a gravity fed system, a vacuum fed system, sorry, so that when the engine's turning over, it releases the fuel down into the fuel injection system. So remember, you might buy an old bike and it might have a fuel tap on it. Make sure you're on the fuel on, not fuel off, it won't run. And if you do run out of fuel and you switch it to reserve, remember when you fuel it back up again to switch it back onto the main tank. Else next time when you run out, you won't have reserve. Now, as I say, most of the bikes don't have that nowadays. They have a fuel gauge, so you don't have that to worry. In the good old days, we used to have to zero the trip meter, fill it up, and know that we got about 100 miles before we'd hit reserve, typically. So we have a fuel tap. Now, this bike, because it's fuel injected, it does the wonderful cold start and warm start for us automatically. But in the good old days, we had on a carburetor what was called a choke. And a choke was a little lever, and all it did is basically shut off the amount of air going in, and the amount of fuel that was going in was effectively increased because they reduced the flow of air in, and it made it a rich mixture. And you need a richer mixture for starting a cold engine. So it was a manual means of adjusting the fuel air mixture so that the bike could start easier. And once the bike was warmed up, you started putting the choke off till eventually it was off completely. If you left it for a wee while though, especially if it was an air cooled engine, it would cool down very, very quickly, and then you would end up having to put the choke back on again to get started. The great thing is with these fuel injected bikes these days, you turn the key, you hit the start button, and the bike starts up itself now. It's all done automatically for you. So there's a wee bit then on the fuel on the carburetor. And if you put around this side, Lewis, of the bike, another control that's missing on this bike. There would normally be, on this one you can see, this is maybe made for different markets, this particular casing. In there would be a shaft would go in there, and that would be a kickstart, and you could actually kickstart the bike. So if you stand it loose, I'll show you the kickstart would come up here, fold it in, you pulled that out, put your foot on it, and you gave it a full kick right through, and it turned over the engine and helped the engine to start. And I'll just simulate how it was done. It was done like this. If you buy an old bike with a kickstart, you sort of leaned the bike towards you slightly, so you looked down. We used to line ourselves up on the petrol cap, you pulled out the kickstart and you gave it a full kick right through. Alright, and that's how you started it. Of course, you don't know how lucky you are now, because we've now got electric starts on this. So we turn the key on, we make sure it's in neutral, we hit the start button. Suzuki's used to need the clutch pulled in as a safety. Hit the start button, and the electrics on the motorbike and the starter motor turned over the engine, did the same job as the starter, and it fired up the bike for you. Alright, now then, let's just see if there's anything else. I've got the foot pegs here, we've already mentioned them for the rider. These are usually foot pegs on the back, but we've put crash bungs on ours to protect these bikes should they fall over in the yard. Also protects the students as well. And this safety cage that you see here, again, that's not standard fitment, that's to protect the bike as well. So we can protect the bikes here and the students should the bikes fall over. But that's usually where the rear pillions would sit. Of course the rider sits here, nice close to the tank, and the pillion sitting on the back here. And here's the rails on the back here as well. Around the back here, there's a couple of things to mention. The number plate, full size, visible. L plate, notice it's not cut down and made illegal, full size, and reflector on the back as well, of the motorbike as well. Now, let's have a quick look at my list, Lewis, and just check and make sure that I've covered all the main things that I want to mention here. Yes, we mentioned the throttle, we mentioned the front brake. You can look at my notes and see what I've covered here. We mentioned the throttle, the front brake, the clutch, the indicators, the choke, the electric start, the engine cutout switch, the lighting switches, the horn. Oh, we didn't mention the horn. See that? That's why you need to check your notes. Horn underneath, and you can see it's even the shape of a horn. Okay, horn underneath. The fuel tap and the ignition switch. So we've identified them and we've explained them to you. And the horn is just a warning of presence, alright, just a warning of presence. The foot control, we mentioned the rear brake, we mentioned the kickstart, we mentioned the gear change lever, we mentioned the footrest, front and the rear, and there we go. We've mentioned the instruments, the speedometer, the rev counter. Not every bike has a rev counter, and any warning lamps that might come up. This one, we can't see them all, but we've got the little eco light that comes up when I first switched that on there, lets them know being eco. That's if it's got a fuel injection fault, so you sometimes get warning lights that might come up as well. Alright, so there's the basic controls on the motorcycle. Let's turn over the page. The next thing we're going to look at is carrying out basic maintenance checks on the motorcycle. So let's have a look at that next. Right then, starting from the front of the motorcycle, Lewis, around the front here, we're going to work our way through the motorcycle. Then I'll have a look back at my list and make sure that I've covered everything. Starting off first of all here with the tyres. Make sure your tyres are properly inflated as per the manufacturer's recommendations from a cold setting. Your minimum tread depth is only 1mm as opposed to 1.6 with the car over the central 3/4 and full circumference. But I'm going to tell you now, if you're going that low, your tyres, your bike will feel horrible. It's tracking. I usually get mine replaced when they're down to about 2mm of tyre tread depth, and they usually tend to wear out on the front one anyway, on the shoulders or in the middle. On the rear it tends to be the middle that tends to wear out first. Look for any cuts, tears, screws, any nails sticking in them, any problems like that. So first thing is checking your tyres. Make sure they're properly inflated as per the manufacturer's handbook, and make sure the tyres are legal, roadworthy, and no obvious cuts, tears, rips in them, etc. Any punctures, anything like that. Let's stick with the front wheel. We've got here the cast alloy wheel on this one. Check for any visible damage on the rim. It's been knocked or cracked or anything like that. If it's spokes, make sure, wring your finger out so you give a nice ping noise. If there's any loose spokes, don't try and tighten them up yourself. That's a job for a wheelwright. So that's all we need to say then really for the wheel itself. Let's stick with the front here. This is a disc brake on the front. We check to make sure it's not badly grooved or too thin and too badly lipped at the end here, in which case it might need to be replaced. Some of them might be stamped 4mm, which basically means how thin it can go down to. If you look down in there, Lewis, down the side, sticking with the front of the bike, the brake system, we look to see there's pad material on the disc and it's not worn down to the metal. Again, if that's worn down to the metal, it should be replaced. The pad should be replaced. So if the disc is worn too thin, it should be replaced. replaced. Also, if you're braking and you're getting a pulsing sensation through your hand, that usually suggests that the brake disc itself is warped and it usually has gone thin and it needs to be replaced. So that's the disc, that's the brakes. Also with the brakes, check to see there's no fluid leaking from it or any signs of the hose being perished or anything like that. Again, up here at the master cylinder, if it's this style of master cylinder, round this side, Lewis. Inspection window, make sure it's not too low. If it's too low, you can draw in air and it gets a spongy front brake, so make sure you've got plenty of fluid in it as well, and top it up with appropriate brake .4, for example, brake fluid into it as well. So that's your front brake system. Make sure that's operating correctly, the pads aren't worn down and the fluid levels not too low. Sticking with the front of the motorcycle, this is the suspension here. Again, it should move up and down freely. I'm pushing up and down, it should move up and down freely. And that absorbs the energy when you're braking, unlike a push bike where there was no suspension. This is why a lot of people are terrified to use the front brake, because on a push bike, if you squeeze the front brake, there was no suspension at the front. All that energy and momentum lifted the back wheel and it sort of pivoted over the front wheel. Now when you brake with a motorcycle, as I do it like this, braking, that weight's transferred on the forks and they absorb the energy, and that's why you don't get flung over the handlebars. Alright, now what we do is we take that sideless, we check to see there's no fluid leaking here, any fluid dripping out or running down there. That again would be an indication the seals inside here are maybe gone, or any pitting, bad pitting here, that can again rip the seals. Now let's talk about wheel bearings since we're at the front. We would elevate, which I'm going to do now. I'm going to put the bike on the centre stand, and what I'm going to do here is just actually show you what I mean by this, and that is that we elevate the front wheel off the ground like this, and we try and pull it. It's actually easier for me to show it. I usually get someone to push down at the back, but Lucy's operating the camera. I'll do it with my hands. We try and see if there's any sideways movements. There's wheel bearings in there, and if they're knackered, you'll see maybe brown, looks like rust, rusty water coming out of them. That's usually an indication that the bearings themselves are knackered. Never put a power wash. You'll see there's a seal on the outside there. Never put a power wash in there. That can take all the grease out and they'll run out very, very quickly. So don't power wash the bearings. So that's the wheel bearings in there. You get head bearings up in here as well. And again, what we do is we elevate the front wheel and we see if there's any movement with the forks back and forward, and any play up in here, what we call the headstock. We also tend to put the bike up, make sure it moves freely from side to side and it's not sort of springing to the middle. It's a nice free movement, and as I say, there's no movement in here. This is the headstock here, and if it's too loose, that might need tightened as well if they've come kind of loose. But again, unless you know what you're doing, don't touch it, leave it to a mechanic. It's very easy to over tighten these. But there is bearings in these, head bearings at the top and the bottom there for your head bearing cups. Okay, sticking with the motorcycle, moving through it for maintenance. All the electrics, make sure all your lights are working, your high beam, your low beam, your indicators are working okay, your brake lights, easy just to put your hand over the back and press the brake, the front brake and the rear brake. So if I put the lights on just now, for example, cup the back, I know the tail light's working. I put the front brake on, there it's working. I put the brake light on, there it's working. I put the indicators on, left hand side, right hand side. Come to the front of the motorcycle now, Lewis, we can check. Front, left, check. Now this bike needs to be started before we can actually get the high and low beam. So we'll now see it now working. There's my high beam, there's my low beam. Now it's working, Lewis. If you come back up here, we can show the blue light. And there's the blue light working for the high beam and the low beam as well. Alright, so there we go, and we can switch that back off. Now since I'm here, I should really probably show you the ignition lock. You can take that out and you'll notice I put on the first lock. Now it's not really a great safety device. You get two guys come along with a van, they can easily pick your bike up and still throw it in the back of a van, but I guess it's better than nothing. But there you go. Right then, keep working away along. So that was the electrics. Come around this bit here, Lewis. We've got the engine. All fluid levels, I'll just say fluid levels. Check to make sure that the bike's got the right amount of oil in it. Now most bikes will have an inspection window, like a bit of glass with an inspection window, or like this, you take it out and it's got a dipstick in it. Make sure it's wiped clean at the end, and that they've got an upper limit and a lower limit on it, the maximum and minimum. Check it in your owner's manual. Make sure that seal, oil seal, is still intact. And what you do when you're checking that is that you make sure the bike's on level ground, get your friend to help you if you can, and wipe it, stick it in, or whatever it says in the owner's manual. Don't screw it in because that gives a false reading usually, depending on the bike. Take it back out, make sure it's got the right amount of oil. So you're either going to do it with dipstick or you're going to do it with an inspection window. That's your 4-stroke. If it's a 2-stroke, of course, you've got to make sure there's enough 2-stroke oil in the tank. Other fluid levels to check. If it's not a maintenance freestyle battery, make sure it's got the right amount of water in it. Of course, for your battery, although you'll find it nowadays, we used to just boil up water in a kettle and put it in, but you'll find now most of them are now sealed batteries. Other fluid levels, of course, petrol for the journey. We already mentioned the brake fluid here. Some have got a master cylinder for the clutch as well, so the clutch isn't too heavy, so you could also have a master cylinder here for the clutch as well. So there's kind of the most important fluid levels that we're going to have to be checking on a motorcycle. The exhaust system, check it for rusting or blowing, making an excessive noise. Easy way to check that one, Lewis, if we come up here, is if we get a cloth and just peel it over the end when it's started up and it's still relatively cold cloth, you can find it literally silences any noise down, apart from the engine of course, and silence it down. If you're getting excessive noise, run your hands along without touching the exhaust and feel to see if you can feel where the air's blown out. There might be, for example, a hole in the exhaust. So check the integrity of the exhaust system. Don't take the silencers out the back, that's why they're fitted into the bike to cancel it down. So make sure your integrity of your exhaust is okay as well. Sticking with the side of the bike, Lewis, come at the back of the bike, we mentioned wheel bearings. We've also got wheel bearings for the rear of the bike as well. Again, we wobble the bike from side to side just to make sure that the wheel bearings are okay. Sticking down at the side here, Lewis, the back brake here, we sort of the front one. This is a mechanical device, and you'll see the wheel lever points back. I've still got plenty of material. If that pointer went right to the very back, it means it needs to be replaced. Now inside, if I could show it, it's just like two shoes that push out and push against the outer drum, and that's it. It's what we call a hub rear brake. Not the most efficient braking system, but certainly good enough for a little 125 for the rear brake, which doesn't need a lot of braking. It tended to be a lot worse when it was a front brake, because you really need a good front brake. But you used to get hub brakes on the front, hub brakes on the rear. On the old 125, especially Honda CG 125s, were classics with the hub brakes front and rear. We've now got a disc front brake and a hub rear brake, more efficient braking system. Popping round, Lewis, we also have the chain to be able to look at here as well. This has got an axle that goes right through. We'll loosen that off, we'll loosen off the adjusters at the end here, the lock nuts at the end, tighten them up, and it pulls the axle back, and you'll notice there's notches here. They've got to be the level both sides, so the wheels run, if you look there, Lewis, at me, so they land straight. The wheels must run lined up like this. You don't want the back wheel running squint, so this must be lined up. Now check your owner's manual, it'll tell you, again like the tire pressures, it'll tell you how much free play there should be at the centre here, up and down. Usually it's about 25mm there or thereabout. If it's too tight, it'll cause excess wear on the chain. If it's too slack, the chain can even come off. The chain should be lubricated as required, the more you'll use it, but usually it's at least once a week with proper lubricating chain oil. Don't just put any oil in, it'll throw back off again. And as I say, adjust it correctly and then tighten everything back up again once you've done that. Once that's adjusted fully back, the chain's usually, that's the chain knackered. You'll also be able to tell, it would be able to, that one, it's still pretty good. If you can pull the chain off the end, that's an indication it's pretty knackered as well. So you would replace the chain. To be honest, nowadays, it used to be in the past that you'd basically get two chains to every one set of sprockets, but the chains are getting much better now, and they do a great deal on chain and sprocket sets. So usually by the time the chain's knackered, usually it's just a good idea to do a chain and sprocket set. Certainly don't put though a new chain on old knackered sprockets. How will you know if they're knackered? If you look at me now, Lewis, instead of the teeth being like this, nice and pointed, they go thin and they point over in the direction of travel movement, which would be forward in this case. So once the sprockets are worn, they really do need to be replaced. So there's your chain, there's your sprockets. Rear shockers, on this one's what we call a twin shock model. Sometimes you get just the one shock. Again, same thing, the suspension should move up and down freely, no signs of oil running down or dripping off it. Let's have a quick look at my wee book, Lewis, and just see if there's anything else that I'm need to be kind of saying here. The brakes, yes, we mentioned, check them for wear, correct operation adjustment. The steering head, check for wear and adjustment. Control cables, yep, never really mentioned them much. So there's my throttle, make sure it goes back freely. If I'm using my clutch here, make sure it's going in and out smoothly. Again, they should be lubricated with a light 3-in-1 type oil, and make sure they operate smoothly. If they're stiff, it's usually a sign the wires inside are beginning to break up. Check all your fluid levels. Well, we mentioned that hydraulic brake fluid, engine oil for the 4-stroke, 2-stroke, the coolant. Oh, we never mentioned coolant, of course, because this is an air-cooled bike which has got fins on it, but of course it could equally be a water-cooled bike, in which case it would have a radiator on the front, and what it would have is an expansion tank. Now you've got to make sure that the water levels between the lower and the upper, so that's what we call an expansion tank. This of course is an air-cooled bike. See, that's why you should always refer to your notes, it's so easy to miss something. So that's an air-cooled bike with the fins, water-cooled bike, like your car, need to make sure it's got water in it, and as I say, if it's got antifreeze in it, especially for the winter time use as well, right? Lights, correct operation, well we mentioned that. The suspension, we mentioned that. The wear adjustment, there are some adjustments on the suspension. You can make them a bit stiffer if you're carrying a pillion passenger, for example, increase the preload. This is very basic, this bike, though, not an awful lot you can do it. Some bikes have preload, compression, rebound dampen. Some bikes now are electronic suspension systems on them and can adjust as they go. What else to mention here? The wheels and spokes, we mentioned them for damage and adjustment. The wheel bearings, wear and play, we mentioned that. The tyres themselves for wear, damage, pressure. Drive chains and sprockets, we mentioned that. The wear, the lubrication and the tension. The nuts and bolts, yeah, good idea. Once you're going around your bike once a week at the end of it, check all the nuts, all the bolts, make sure everything's all tight, nothing's come loose. This is especially true on single cylinder motorcycles where there can be a bit of vibration, things can come loose, so that's why you should always give your bike a good clean down at the end of the week and give your bike a good check over. The number plate and reflectors, well we kind of mentioned them earlier. Number plate proper size, reflector in place. The mirrors, yeah, make sure the mirrors are properly adjusted so you can see clearly behind you and that they're not cracked and broken, for example. The exhaust check for blowings as well. Now remember, when we're talking about controls, maybe something else I should mention, that this is just a basic 125, but you can get bikes with additional features now. You can get bikes with, instead of just a chain drive, of course they come with a shaft drive or belt drive, less maintenance required on the shaft drive. You get bikes now with different traction control modes, ABS fitted to them. This bike has not got ABS, but ABS like you've got on the cars. As I say, traction controls, electronic suspension systems, fairing systems, tyre pressure monitors and everything on them. So in other words, you can find additional features on motorcycles over and above what we've got here on this little basic 125. Right, so that takes care of carrying out the basic machine checks. Now we also have a daily sort of check that we carry on a motorcycle called the powder check. Petrol, oil, water, damage, electrics, rubber, powder. So have I got enough petrol for my journey? Oil, have I checked my oil level, is it okay? Now you get used to your bike, so that might be a once a week thing, but check your oil. Water, has it got enough water in it? Remember, coolant. D, damage. If your bike's outside, especially, somebody might have knocked it over, picked it back up again. For all you know, the brake lever's been snapped off it. So check for any visible signs of damage. The electrics, that's all your lights and everything. Horn, watched all the time of operation of horn, for example. And R is rubber. Check your tyres. Now I do, if I come around here, Lewis, I don't get a tyre pressure gauge out every morning, of course I don't, but I do what I call the thumb test, and I push it with my thumb. If I can push that and deflect it, I know my tyres aren't even blown up. Now tyres, even just being 2 couple of pound underneath, unlike a car, you will really feel it. So don't leave your bike for long periods of time without checking your tyre pressures. It's very easy. Typically a bike can easily lose a pound, even without a puncture. It could lose a pound every month out of them. So if you've left your bike sitting in the garage for 3 months, you might suddenly find it's £3 down on the tyres. So do check your tyre pressures regularly as well. So that's what we call the daily checks then, or your pre-journey checks, your powder checks: petrol, oil, water, damage, electrics. Now we're not trying to turn you into mechanics there, but what we are saying is you need to know if your bike's road legal and if it's road worthy. If you're not comfortable carrying out those checks, get someone that is. Some of those adjustments you might be comfortable carrying out yourself. If you're not, get someone that is. And as I say, be prepared to book it into the garage to get the work done. And of course there's the regular servicing which your bike needs as well, as part of maybe the warranty or just for the motorcycle, typically every 4,000 miles or every year. Now let's look now quickly then at stands, Lewis. Come around this side, we're going to do the stands, and I'm aware of the time. Look how the time flies round again. But we're going to look at the stands now, show you the stands. Now on a motorcycle you've got 2 stands on a motorcycle. You've got the centre stand, you've got the side stand. The side stand is the easiest stand to use, and you'll find that most sports bikes will come with a side stand. Not every bike though comes with dual stand, centre and side stand. Now the side stand is one that's easiest to use, there's no doubt about it. The centre stand is usually considered to be the most stable of the two stands, and it's the one that it's easier to carry out any maintenance. At the moment, for example, you see the rear wheel is elevated. If you look over there, Lewis, I've got the rear wheel elevated, so I can carry out maintenance easy with that centre stand. So let's show you how the stands now work. The first thing is to say about any ground you're going to put a stand on, ideally should be level and firm. So don't go put it on uneven ground and where it's not firm. Now you can't get perfect level ground every time, but just watch the bike's not at too much of an angle. So if I take this bike off the stand just now, I'll show you how I use the centre stand in a moment. First thing I'm going to do is just put the bike on the side stand here. Now to put on the side stand, all I did was made sure the stand was fully forward and over and got a bit of weight on it. Sometimes you've got to watch, you get a wee rubber foot on here it could catch and not let it go forward, or some of them are spring loaded and they can spring back. So make sure it's fully forward and it's down. Open the door when you're getting on. That makes it easy to get on the bike. Always hold the front brake like I'm doing when you're getting on. Have a check over your left shoulder, over your right shoulder. Bend your knee and lift your leg high up and over. Don't do it with an extended leg kicking the back of the bike. Bend the knee up, over and on. And once you're on, you can release the front brake and then put the stand up. Getting off the motorcycle, don't try and get off the bike without the stand down. I've seen people do this, taking cramp or getting the foot caught, next thing they fall over, bike on top of them. Put the stand down first. Fully forward, lean it over, open the door again for getting off, hold the front brake, check to make sure it's safe to get off, you're not going to kick anyone, bend the knee, leg high up and over and back off again. Close the door, give the bike a wee shake, make sure you've left it stable. Now if you look here, Lewis, that bike's got a nice amount of lean on it. I wouldn't want it leaning too much, it's putting too much strain on the stand, but equally I would not want to leave it too upright. Sudden gust of wind and she's blown over. So make sure she's got enough lean that she's not stressing the stand, but equally not going to blow over. Now some people don't like seeing people getting on and off bikes with the stands down. I'm not putting any extra weight on it there by doing that, and it's a safety, because if I fall, only I fall, but not me with the bike on top of me. Let's show the centre stand now, Lewis. Centre stand, put the ball of the foot on the lug of the stand, rock the bike, make sure both feet are down because it acts like a cantilever. Now at that point there, if you look now, Lewis, I'm pushing down, keeping my heel off the ground, look, right heel off the ground, pushing down into the stand, and look, just by pushing, that bike's already wanting to go back. Can you see that, Lewis? Now, if I now pull back slightly with my left hand up here, and at the same time lift up and pull back with my right hand and put all three together, watch what happens. There she goes, back on the stand. Taking her off again, left foot on, push my leg against the side, lower it down, let it go over the cam, and then lower it down gently so it doesn't run away. Notice it acts like a brake and a stabiliser. Let the stand go, make sure she's up fully, then hold the front brake. So that's how we put the bike on and off the stands. Okay. Now, do I want to really say any more about the stands? No, I think that's enough of the stands. I'm aware about my time here. I don't want to go over 40 minutes for element B either, because I'm explaining absolutely everything here to you. Again, if with people with experience we could get through this much quicker, we'd just ask you questions, you've given us right answers, we would move it on. So there we go, a little bit about the centre stands and as I say, the side stands. Okay, next thing I want to talk about now is starting and stopping the engine. Very simple now to start and stop the engines on these bikes now, because in the good old days, I say, we had to put the fuel tap on, we had to put the choke on and before we could start it. Nowadays we've got a little routine, we used to have a routine called FIGS, fuel, ignition, gear, start. Was the fuel tap turned on? Is the ignition turned on? Is it in neutral? And then we're ready to start it. Nowadays it's a bit simpler. We don't have fuel to switch on this type of bike. We just put the ignition on. It is in neutral, but I could double check it by rocking the bike back and forward just to make sure. Or I could also, when you're starting a motorcycle, we should always, I've not got the bike running now, that's why I've not got my helmet on, we should sit astride the bike. Not always a good idea to start your bike when you're not on it and then leave it ticking over. Somebody could come along, jump on it and nick it for starters. So really you should be jumping on your bike when you're ready to go, with all your gear on, ready to go. So get your ignition on, make sure it's in neutral or neutral light in, and you can also have your clutch pulled down, and then you simply hit the start button and that's it, she's ready to start up. If I want to turn them back off again, all I do, turn the ignition back off. And that's the procedure for both cold and warm start procedure. There is no chokes now. Alright, so it's as simple as that to start the motorcycle. Now, wheeling the motorcycle around, and then hopefully we'll get this finished in about 40 minutes, which is what I kind of laid myself down for time on this one. I know I'm talking fast, I hope you can keep up with the fast talking Scotsman. There is a lot to get through here. Right then, the next thing is, how do you walk with a motorbike? Well, I've seen a lot of people dropping motorcycles. First thing is, if you go at the front, Lewis, it's probably easy to demonstrate this one, always have the bike slightly tilted in towards you. I see a lot of people walking with the bike like this, getting away from them. Never let the bike get away, but equally, don't walk along with it leaning too much. It's just a slight tilt, slightly in towards you. That's all you need. Now, if you're going to the right, it also tilts, you'll see, in towards me, and if I go to the left, it also goes in. So don't do that. Don't turn to right and let it get away from you. Equally, don't turn to left and lean it over too far. You still keep that tilt about the same whether you're going left or right. So that's the first thing to say. The second thing to say is, when I'm walking with a motorbike, don't look down. Lift the vision, look where you're walking with your motorbike. It's amazing how many people look down and walk into something with a motorbike or don't see where they're going. So lift the vision, look where you're going. That's the second thing. Next thing is, watch where I'm standing. When I'm on the side of the bike, I don't walk so I'm kicking the pegs. I stand by tilting the bike. That effectively allows me to get away from the peg. Notice when I go more upright, it pulls me in. Whereas when I tilt the bike, it takes me away from the bike. That's important. Also, notice that when I move to the right, look how I move forward. Because if I stand back, I'm overstretching. Equally, when I turn to the left, watch what I do, I move back. So watch then that when I go to the right, you'll notice I move forward. And when I go to the left, you'll notice I move back. I'm altering my position at the side of the bike, depending on whether I'm going left or right. Now, the next thing to say is that if I need to brake when I'm walking and I'm turning to the right, don't brake like this. Look what happens. It brakes, bounces, and it falls out. Watch what I do if I need to brake. I turn, I straighten, and then I brake. Now, the next thing is, watch how I'm braking here. If I walk along and I put my fingers on and I brake gently, notice how the bike comes to a gentle rest. Watch what happens if I push it fast and I really jerk that front brake on. Notice how the weight transferred to the front, lock the front wheel. That's why at the beginning of your lessons we don't let you use the front brake to begin with. We use rear brake only, we do slow speed exercises because we want you to learn to use the rear brake first and to be gentle. And we want you to be smooth with the front brake. And we get you to walk with the bike just getting a feeling for that front brake to begin with. So we'll do lefts and rights with you. Alright, so we're almost at the end of B now. So we're going to get you to walk with the bike, walking to the left, walking to the right. We're also going to show you how to look with the bike, how to position yourself alongside it, and also how to walk back with the bike. In the Module 1 test, I see a lot of people that are trained to do this. Now, whilst that's okay doing this in the Module 1 test, because it's in a nice flat level area, it's a bit of a problem if you're on uneven ground, because now you're nowhere near that front brake and you're nowhere near the rear brake. So if you take a big bike and try and walk with it, for example like this, down this slope a little bit here, the bike would want to get away from me. So I'm not a fan of that, I'll be honest. I'm a fan, it works okay on level ground, but on uneven ground, that's the best way. Walk so that you can look both ways and get both hands on the motorcycle. Now, if you're a smaller person and you're having a bit of difficulty with the weight of your motorcycle, here's a wee tip for you. Lean your bike in, put your bum against the seat like this, and use your legs to walk you back, along with your arms, both. So you can look over both shoulders and use your bum, your hip on the seat, and that helps to walk the bike back as well. Okay, so we'll show you all these techniques then. We'll show you how to walk with your bike, how to hold your bike, etc, etc. Now, let me have a quick look at my bike, my book, and over at the finishing time here. Just make sure I've covered everything on this. We mentioned the stands. Centre stand, how and when to use them. Side stand, how and when to use them. Yes, we've covered that. Demonstrate the correct technique for putting the motorcycle on off its stand. Yes, these are my notes, by the way. Explain the effects of camber and gradient. Yes, we did say that, for example, if you're putting a bike on the centre stand downhill, it's easy, it goes on dead easy, but it's really hard to take it off the centre stand, so watch the effects of gradient. And if it's bad camber, it can make the bike very unstable. We did mention that as well. And firm ground we mentioned. Now we'll let you practice that and make sure you're comfortable putting the bike on and off the stand. We've also mentioned the start wheeling the bike to left and right, and we've shown you how to do that, and you'll get a chance practicing that. And then we've showed you the start routine for being able to start the bike as well. And I think that pretty much, yes, concludes element B. thank you very much. John Macdonald over now. The next one we'll be looking at is going to be C, and then we're going to D, and then on. Thank you very much.